Hello and welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we provide thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you, because if you're on this call, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name is Ian Heller. I'll be your co-host today, along with my business partner and good friend, the master of metadata, Jonathan Bine, PhD. Jonathan, how are you today, my friend?
Ian, you are the most superlative person I know.
Most superlative, I think. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So we have a very interesting subject today, which is a distinction that you have brilliantly defined, I think, better than anyone, which is that there's a huge difference between shopping and buying in a B2B environment. So I want to get to that, but I ran into something right before we started the call that just came out November 10th, 2020 from the EU. And it's about Amazon and antitrust. So I just want to read this real quickly. So this is on the EU's website. It's ec.europa.eu. And the headline is, Antitrust Commission sends statement of objections to Amazon for the use of non-public independent seller data and opens second investigation into its e-commerce business practices. So the first couple of paragraphs say the European Commission has informed Amazon of its preliminary view that it has breached EU antitrust rules by distorting competition in online retail markets. The Commission takes issue with Amazon systematically relying on non-public business data of independent sellers who sell on its marketplace to the benefit of Amazon's own retail business, which directly competes with those third-party sellers. Second paragraph, the Commission also opened a second formal antitrust investigation into the possible preferential treatment of Amazon's own retail offers and those of marketplace sellers that use Amazon's logistics and delivery services. So there are two claims here, apparently. One is that they're using third-party seller data to their own benefit. And the second claim, which is they're claiming is an antitrust problem. And the second one is that they're preferentially treating Amazon's own offers and those of third-party sellers who are relying on Amazon's logistics network, which I assume is FBA. That's a big deal coming from the EU. I know you just probably heard that in real time here, Jonathan, but any reaction?
Say it ain't so, Ian.
So you're shocked?
Yeah, I'm shocked. Not.
I was blown away myself. Yeah, I mean, look, this is going to be an ongoing thing, and I think it really gets to the heart of and here's where I think Amazon's playing a dangerous game. The antitrust rules are not written to accommodate marketplaces. By getting into these situations, Amazon is provoking or risks provoking federal regulatory agencies around the world to redefine antitrust rules to incorporate what marketplaces do. And I frankly think it's avoidable, and they wouldn't hurt their business results to stay away from this stuff, but it's like they can't resist. It's just in their nature. So anyway, okay, so today's topic, why a great shopping experience is more important than the checkout experience. Jonathan, you want to give us some background, or you jump into the slides? How do you want to handle this?
You bet. Let's go. So at the broadest level, there's this entire customer journey that ends with fulfillment and product being shipped and received. At the beginning may start with search or some other concept about what somebody's trying to purchase. But in the middle of that journey are two key things that the industry has pretty well grappled with and implemented, which are what we call shopping, how people research, find, assess the products they want to buy, separate from buying, how they order, transact, purchase what they want to buy. Again, there are other steps in the journey that are going to get a lot more relevant in the next couple of years. A lot of what the industry's done around e-commerce in the last 10 to 12 years is how do we get the shopping and buying thing to a reasonable level of consistency and performance. So here's some data from our research. We run a shopping and buying survey biannually. That means every 2 years. And so we're on shopping and buying 3.0, and this is some preliminary data. We'll be completing this probably by about second quarter of 2021. And so we looked at a variety of different ways that people shop for products, including talking to people, good old-fashioned talking to a CSR, sales rep, maybe asking a colleague, decreasingly, but still people shopping with print. Not surprisingly, digital shopping is the really big thing, and it's been accelerated by COVID. Whereas before, maybe 70 to 80% of people's digital shopping, maybe 70 to 80% of people would shop very frequently digitally. It's now in the 80 to 95% range. But as we know, as listeners on this call know, only a small portion of that is going through the shopping cart, right? So 80 to 95% of the shopping is happening digitally, and that could mean through a search engine, which then leads to perhaps a marketplace, a distributor website, or a manufacturer website. But then only a small portion then ends up going through the shopping cart. And by the way, this 10 to 20% number is generous. I know there are listeners on this call who are not at the 10% level, and that's fine. You'll get there. But there's this big gap between how people shop and what goes through the shopping cart. Ian, what are you getting so far from what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, we should point out that there are a bunch of shopping methods that didn't make the cut of the top 4 on the left, right? So there are you've got 4 methods: search engines, manufacturer website, distributor website, marketplaces. But there were other methods like catalogs, et cetera, that didn't make the cut on this slide. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. Right. The whole print category did not make the cut here.
Right. So these are just the top 4 out of a dozen probably that you've identified over the years, or 10. And what's interesting to me is that search engines are still number 1, right? What's also interesting to me is that marketplaces, which probably, were they even on the list when you did this 2 years ago? Probably not very high, right?
Marketplaces are new. So why don't you speak to that?
Well, so, marketplaces are aggregated sites like Amazon, where you have many sellers who combine their offers, all transacted on a single site. And it's roaring into becoming a very important part of e-commerce. In fact, we did have someone, and we encourage you, by the way, to send in questions. You can click on the chat or click on the Q&A. And we had a listener who, we've got a couple already jumping in, but this individual said, "I'm surprised at the number for marketplaces. It seems to contradict some of the data from last week about marketplaces taking market share." Yeah, so I think what we reported on, at least one of the data points we reported on last week, was a survey from Digital Commerce 360, where they said that business buyers were making a quarter of their purchases on marketplaces already. So I'm not sure if you're saying that marketplaces look lower or higher than you'd expected from last week, but also remember that this is shopping and not buying, which is the distinction that Jonathan is making. It's shopping means I'm searching, I'm gathering information, I'm looking for something to buy. Buying means I'm actually placing the order. And that's probably the core of the difference here, is that the 25% who are actually making purchase, or excuse me, when we say buyers are making 25% of their purchases on marketplaces, that doesn't mean they started shopping there. They may have looked on a distributor's website to gather information, or in a search engine, but then when they went to place the order, they went to a marketplace to place the order, which is really an important distinction for today, as we're trying to describe the difference between shopping and buying. So I hope that helps.
Well, and I think also in relation to Coburn's question, we were looking at marketplaces now and in 5 years. So the thing that was really affecting the revenue for distributors is where marketplaces are going to be in 5 years, right? I mean, it's coming on really quickly. And so if we extrapolate it forward in 5 years, it's going to take a chunk from distributors. But we had another question from Jason about why we wanted to combine the Gen Z and Millennials. Jason, I think the simple answer is we wanted to say younger people, as opposed to less young, as opposed to people who have hair color and quantity like mine and Ian's. So we're really trying to distinguish between boomers, Gen X and not Gen X, and we're calling the Gen Z and Millennials that's really the not Gen X. And then the other piece, Jason, that you brought up, which is great, thank you. So back to this distinction between shopping and buying, we considered EDI part of the buying use case, and we considered actually punch out part of the buying use case, although we've had dialogue with people say, you could argue that it's more on the shopping side of things, but ultimately I think we got this person to the point, who's a very sophisticated digital e-commerce person, agreeing that yes, it's more on the buying side of things. So anyhow, to this point, if we look at this other table here at the bottom, roughly what this says is, if you got a small customer, meaning the size of the business, a small consumer, and you got a younger person, the shopping is going to be highly, highly, highly electronic. As you move towards a medium-sized customer of yours, or of the size of their business, and you move towards a Gen X person, that's not a middle-aged person, but that's in the middle of this classification, then you're going to see kind of a hybrid of electronic and personal. They might start to get the attention of field sales. When you get to a large company and probably an older customer, they are going to merit the attention of field sales. They are going to make it worthwhile for the donut run for the field salesperson to come out and interact. So this table is showing roughly, if you're along the diagonal, again, small consumer, youngest person, highly electronic. Gen X, medium size, is going to be hybrid of electronic and personal, and finally the largest, and boomer, is going to be highly personal.
Hey, Jonathan, Tim is asking how you define small, medium, and large.
It's relative to the distributor. So if it's a small customer of yours and probably a small business, those are often hand in hand, but they're not strictly correlated. If it's a small customer of yours, meaning they're not getting a lot of your time, they're not going to get field sales time, right? You got somebody buying 5,000 a year.
So this is really a small customer as an account, not small consumer.
Correct.
Okay, got it. That helps. All right.
Yeah, it should say small account instead of small consumer.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Tim.
Yeah, good. So that's what's going on with shopping. And the reason we don't think about the distinction between shopping and buying is because when you go to Amazon, which is where most of us do most of our electronic shopping and buying happens at the same place. But 15 years ago, you might have shopped in the Grainger print catalog, and you might have gone online to buy, or you might have called somebody. In the B2B world, we have a lot more combinations of ways you can shop and ways you can buy, and that's why it makes sense to tease these things apart. So let's talk about Amazon in yet another vein here. So the big thesis here is, unless you're Amazon and you've got one-click buying, and Ian, what's that thing you love about their credit cards? The way they do their credit card stuff?
It's the only site I buy from where I don't have to put anything into one-click buy. I mean, everywhere else, I at least have to put in the 3 digits on my credit card.
Right.
And I don't know how Amazon does it, but I mean, does anybody else know of a website where you don't have to put in anything? I mean, you don't have to put in any, you just, you get the reminder, you one-click buy, and boom, you're done. I don't know how they do it.
It's pretty impressive. So unless you've got that, which by the way is no longer under patent, I think the patent has come off of that. But unless you've got one-click ordering, you really are not going to differentiate your site on buying. You have EDI or you don't. You have transactional e-commerce or you don't. You have punch out or you don't, et cetera. There's not much of a gradation. Whereas on the shopping side, this is where customers are going to come away with the experience that says, yeah, this is a place I want to go back to. This could become a destination for what I do. This has everything I need. Grainger, for the longest time, occupied that place in industrial, right? Mm-hmm. People would go to Grainger because the experience was good. They had the information. So let's talk about what the table stakes are today, and then we're going to talk about where we think things are going. So Ian, why don't you lead off?
Well, I think that some of the mistakes that distributors make is they don't have their full assortment online, and there are always good excuses for doing this. Like in construction supplies, people don't want to put commodities online. But if you go to Fastenal, they'll sell you rebar by the stick. It's really expensive, but at least it's on there. And people who buy rebar know if I need, 100 sticks of it, I'm going to call and get a quote anyway. So getting your full assortment on there at least tells people that you have the product, even if you're not expecting them to buy them in those unit quantities or at those prices. I think getting consistent product data is really important because you want to make sure that people can find what they're looking for. And if you're not consistent, then you can't put in search filters because you don't have all the attributes you need to apply in a specific product category. You've got to have effective search, which is really gotten a lot easier over the years and a lot less expensive, but it's no better than your product data, right? You've got to have good product data to do any good search. Do you want to take pricing, Jonathan, since this is your area of expertise?
You bet. Yeah. So I think you and I are of the firm opinion that companies should show pricing, and once you log in, you can get your contract pricing if that's something you've created with the distributor. Increasingly, this is the best practice of leading e-commerce sites. So if you look at Ferguson, you can see all of the pricing on Ferguson, and then when you log in, you'll get your specific pricing. A lot of companies, or a number of companies, are reluctant to show pricing for fear that they're going to get into a price game. But there's really not much alternative. There are few cases where people should not be showing pricing. A next thing related is making sure that the inventory availability that's shown is accurate. We're seeing, by the way, this more of a yes, no, as opposed to, we've got 323 in our Carbondale branch, and we've got 424 of these things in our Springfield branch. It's usually going to more of a yes, no than showing specific numbers by branch. Full ERP integration will be another one. We've spoken about this in previous episodes of Wholesale Change. There's just too many loose ends that arise when the e-commerce system is not integrated with the ERP. And it affects some of the things above. It could affect pricing. It could affect information about inventory availability, even if it's refreshed on some periodic basis. So that ends up being a key. And then the final thing is the site performance needs to be there. By the way, if you look at the total set of these things here, if you go into a branch and you're talking to a counter person or customer service rep there, you're going to expect pretty much these same things in the branch. In other words, the offline expectation is parallel or mirrors the online expectation. You'd expect the same thing online that you expect offline. They should be able to tell you whether it's available. There should be pricing there. Again, some distributors have chosen not to do pricing in a branch. People should be able to find stuff. There should be consistent product data, et cetera.
But to get back to the title of this whole episode, Jonathan, you can have all this stuff as part of a great shopping experience, and people use all this stuff, but they don't actually buy on your site. And that happens all the time, that a relatively small portion of e-commerce generated revenue comes to the shopping cart. And the fact that distributors either can't or don't measure that is deadly to their e-commerce efforts, because they use a retail approach where, well, hey, we built all this functionality, but we're only selling 5% of our revenues on the website. Yeah, that's because people don't buy B2B on websites at the same rate that they do in the consumer world. They need to go get a PO. They're going to email it to you. It's going to come out of their ERP. They're going to use e-procurement. They're going to call it in because they have a question or two before they place the order, because these are more complex products and transactions than retail. And so since distributors can't measure that, they assume zero as the default. And that pushes down the e-commerce investment, and it continues to drive this delta between e-commerce leaders and distributors, because distributors, since they can't figure out is it the numerator that's on top?
Yes.
Since they don't know the numerator, they assume it's equivalent to the shopping cart. The denominator is the expenses, and they come out with a negative ROI, even if the website's providing lots of value. This is the curse. This is the curse, in my view, of distributor e-commerce, because it's killing people's willingness to invest. and what are clearly now just state of the art, actually not even state of the art, table stakes, to use the term you put on the slide, capabilities. And I can go into a Home Depot and stand in an aisle and look up where that inventory is in that store right now. And a distributor can't even tell me if it's in stock at a local branch in many cases, because they're not integrating with the ERP because it's expensive. It's too late to focus on that. You have to get past it. And this is what's so valuable about this distinction that you've made, Jonathan, is that I think we all kind of knew it was there, but you're the one who's just held up the light to say, look, people are shopping on your site. These things are important. They've got to know pricing. They've got to be able to find it. They've got to know whether or not it's in stock. That's going to require good state-of-the-art capabilities in ERP integration. That doesn't mean they're buying it through the shopping cart with a credit card, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, we had a multi-billion-dollar distributor approach us a couple of years ago about exactly this problem, and it turned out that people were shopping on their site and they were submitting a lot of orders by EDI, and they were submitting a lot of orders by email. So the analogy that we've started to use is that your shopping site essentially becomes the John Stockton giving the assist to Karl Malone, or pick your point guard of your era, whatever era you grew up in, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whoever it is, that your shopping site is that point guard doing the assist. And most likely, the order is coming through in some other way than the shopping cart. One of the big things we found in shopping and buying the first version was that email was overwhelmingly the preferred way to send orders, because it's so much easier for me than entering a purchase order in a shopping cart.
So Jason's got a couple of points to make. Jonathan, can I interject those, or do you want to?
Let's leave them on the next page if we could. Okay. I think they're going to fit well on the next page. As always, Jason has amazing insights and comments, and we welcome his feedback. So as we look towards the next stage, and when we say the next stage, we really mean over the next 3 to 6 or 7 years as some of the enabling technologies become available. Here's some of the things that we see that are going to be key. Ian, you want to take the first one?
Yeah.
Enrich majority of product items.
You've got to have enriched data, which is multiple photos, not one. In many cases, you have to have, or you should have, videos. You want detailed attributes, and you've got to get your data ready for AI, which I don't hear many people talking about right now. And, so for example, when people search online on a keyboard, they tend to describe the item. When they search with voice, they ask it in the form of a question. So they'll say, Alexa, does so-and-so, or does, Siri, does so-and-so have something in stock? Or, what time is the Cubs game? Or what's the best solution for this, right? I mean, they ask in form of questions because we talk to the digital assistant like we're talking to a person, unlike a search engine where we just type in the attributes of what we're looking for. Well, that means that a lot of your product data has to be written as though it were a response to a question. So, the best compressor for this job is stock number XYZ. So that is a different form.
Are you saying that because Alex Trebek just passed away?
No,
because wasn't he with a you give the answer and you have to figure out the question.
I think so. I didn't watch that show, I'm sorry to say, but I think you're right. But anyway, so you have to have different, more thorough, different data set to interact with AI, and these are growing ways that people are searching for products.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken about this before, that a lot of the initiatives around getting product data have gotten us to what we would call product data 1.0, right, where there's a basic level of information for a good set of products. Smart distributors will say, great, let's take my core SKUs, my A SKUs, and we'll enrich those, because that's going to affect what happens in search engines. That's going to affect what happens on the site in terms of what people are looking at. Those are going to be the most viewed items. But what we're saying here is enriched data has got to make it to the majority of your products. It's got to get to those B, the C, and maybe even eventually the D items. So you're going to get more items. You're going to get much more product data around each of those items, including alternatives and complements. We've done surveys that show that not a ton of distributors have got data about alternatives and complements, and that's going to be a key in this next stage. So let's look at the next one, which is kind of a geeky thing, and it almost doesn't even sound like English, at least that first bullet point. So it's the concept is about instantaneous website interaction. And there's a term that is used in benchmarking the performance of websites. Just get ready for this one. Largest contentful paint. Somebody would have to mark that one for bad English. But the concept about largest contentful paint is when you go to a page, you're actually, at what point are you able to use that page even if everything hasn't loaded? That's the concept of largest contentful paint. So this standards body is saying 2.5 seconds should be the absolute longest that you have to wait before you can start to use that page. Now, a related metric called first input delay is how quickly is it responsive to a click on the website. So 100 milliseconds is 1/10 of a second. And just to give you a sense about human perception, when we look at the old days of film, Ian, it was 30 frames per second. Is that right?
Yeah, 29, but that's
29 frames per second. So the idea was that anything less than 29 frames per second would not seem like a continuous footage to us, right? That's actually less. So that's like 30 milliseconds, right, as opposed to 100 milliseconds. That number of frames per second is a frame every 30 milliseconds. This is less than 100 milliseconds. We can definitely perceive 1/10 of a second, right? That's the big point here. So the first input delay from when I click and when it responds is less than 100 milliseconds. Okay, now another idea on where things need to go is increasingly there's going to be integration from suppliers. We're seeing this already in the electrical space. Some of the big OEMs are starting to integrate what they're doing with their top tier distributors. We'll see this in other sectors as well, where you could essentially form a bill of materials on the manufacturer website, and then it hands off a basket essentially to a distributor website. So that's a seamless transition from supplier to the distributor.
You know what though, Jonathan, I've talked to some distributors about this. They would rather have those tools on their websites to have the configuration there rather than someone going to a manufacturer's website first. That for SEO purposes, and you work so hard to get people to your website, you hate to bounce them off to a manufacturer.
Absolutely, and we're gonna cover that here in just a moment. So when it doesn't initiate or originate on a manufacturer site, where can we get those tools to the distributor site? And those manufacturers that I was mentioning in the electrical space, ABB, Schneider, Rockwell, probably others are starting to deploy some of these tools on their e-commerce site. Okay, so now let's look at some of these things in terms of getting the right product. We look at two aspects. One, how do we get the right product? And the second is, how do we get the product right? So Ian, could you talk about where Amazon is going with its AI-based product expertise, what they are striving towards?
Yeah, I want to interject. First of all, we have a bunch of comments and questions, and we're going to get to them right after we finish this slide. So please don't go away. We'll answer all the questions that come in. So Amazon, and I tell you what, if I never talked about that company again, it'd be too soon. I talk about them all the time, but they're just doing such extraordinary things that are so threatening to distributors. And among them is they're using AI not only to identify the product by voice or by image, but they can understand your purchase history and project your intent and get pretty close to figuring out what you need based on context that's provided by bringing together a lot of data through machine learning algorithms. And at least that's my understanding. And that's tough to deal with or compete with for distributors. And so Look, I mean, distributors are variously exposed to Amazon based on business model and a lot of other factors. So I'm not predicting gloom and doom here. I'm just saying for that, buy and sell quick demand business, they're getting really, really good at this, and they're using AI to do it. And AI, they've got those voice bots now that can interact, and in some cases, people can't tell they're not talking to a real human being. Well, that's going to be a long way before that's a reliable technology. But you have to remember, AI gets better at its task on its own over time without intervention, and it gets better at an accelerating rate. So these tools are going to get to the point where they really do have the knowledge of every product. They know everything about every product ever made attached to a store that sells everything. And they have that stated as a goal in their job descriptions for machine data scientists right now. So we can't take them lightly because they've done so many extraordinary things, but that's where they're going.
Well, and this is in response to what you sometimes hear about large distributors. When you call a large distributor, they say what part number, and this is a different level of functionality, helping people figure out what they need as opposed to what part number. Is a really big value add. And so that's where, if Amazon's doing it, that means other leading companies are going to be doing this within, pick some number of years, 3 to 6 or 7 years. So having that AI-based product expertise would be a huge thing to go beyond what part number.
Right.
Other things in getting the right product are selectors, right? And that can look a little bit like faceted search or attributed search. But once you get into selectors, it's really asking questions about things that you're looking for, and then producing a set of products that would meet the requirements that you've specified. So those are of big value. Again, some of the large electrical OEMs are moving down that path right now. Here's another one, though. When we talk about omni-channel, I think the industry has sort of shifted from multi-channel, meaning silo, to omni-channel. Part of the omni-channel experience is that I'm able to get access to expertise when I'm on a shopping site. I may have some question. It could be highly technical. I'm able to get to expertise via video chat. Not a bot, not a warm body. By the way, Ian, I had a call yesterday from a political polling organization. It took me 45 seconds to realize I wasn't talking to a person.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was a new level of, because I actually asked it.
You thought it was a person, and it turned out to be a politician. That's scary.
It was a politician bot. That's what it was. But I actually asked it a question.
Yeah.
I asked the bot its name. It gave me its name, and it sounded like a human voice. And I asked it another question. It didn't answer me, but it turned out it was a bot. So that was pretty amazing.
That's eerie.
But what people want is they don't want to deal with a warm body. They want to deal with somebody whose language skills in the language of your country are at the right level, whether it's a native speaker or not. They want to deal with somebody that's got the expertise. They want to deal with somebody. They want to have the ability to escalate, to get to the right level of expertise if the initial line is not what they're needing. And this could be by video, right? I mean, video has made its way into all of our lives, as the medium that we're on right now is video. So this integration of human expertise into the digital shopping experience, we think, is another big piece. Ian, you want to talk about voice search and product item recognition?
I think I already did, Jonathan. I think, it's becoming more common, and you need to have a strategy to get your product data up to speed to accommodate this. We do know that item recognition, and that's where you point your phone camera, most of the time that's what it is, at an object, in the software identifies it, matches it. We've tested that with several providers. It worked really well. We haven't tested Grainger's new product item recognition search functionality. We think we're at least as far as we know, they're the first big distributor to introduce that. But we will test that here soon. That is prevalent or predicted to be adopted much earlier than voice search for product search, but we think both are going to be important. And can I jump to some of these questions, or do you want to make another point first?
Let me make a point, and then we'll address Jason's comment.
We got a bunch of them. Yeah.
Let's address Jason's comment. He says more digitally mature distributors are adding smart recommendations to help accelerate cross-sell and upsell. This is one area where AI actually can do, quote unquote, things for distribution to help differentiate from Amazon. So this is a really key point. So I've got cross-sell and reorder here. The cross-sell and reorder is actually a benefit to your customer. You're getting more money, but you are providing a benefit to your customer by recommending things that they could buy that they need. You're not recommending Tic Tacs or National Enquirer magazine checkout at Kroger, right? You're recommending something that they need in their business life. And we've seen extraordinary gains in the use of cross-sell and reorder that for the distributor are providing 10, 15, 20% lift per e-commerce customer, maybe even higher. But then from the customer's perspective, again, it is a service. So to Jason's point, well, to wrap up his comment, distributors have to sell a full solution, not just a single product. That's the road to commoditization.
Yeah, we got a bunch of other comments here. So Jason also points out, we'll go through his first. Points out that distributors have to sell a full solution, not a single product. Single products are the road to commoditization. He talks about how, I believe his point of view is that Amazon's product data is not that great, and that distributors can do a better job providing product data because they can go deeper because they're not as broad. Jason, if I've got that wrong, please let me know. Tim is saying, it is shocking if a distributor cannot connect customer account activity for e-com shopping with the actual purchases by customer and product. Not only do they not see the value of the website in ROI, which was our point, but he points out that they also miss out on a huge amount of rich data on their customers for marketing and follow-up, which I think is really important. It's a great point, Tim, that if you know what your customers are doing online, which is knowable, then that gives you information that you can use to sell and market to those customers, even when they're not online. And so it's not just that you're not capturing the value of the website, but you also are not capturing the value of the data, which I think is really important.
Well, and I think to amplify this point, Tim, digital is the most measurable medium in history. Yeah. It is completely knowable, to your point, right?
Well, I think sales is not knowable, right? At least in conventional ways. When people say, I can't measure the sales on my website because people aren't using the shopping cart, I say, okay, then get creative, pull 300 orders at random out of the last month and have somebody call the people back and ask them if they used the website in the course of putting together that order. That's not a quantitative measurement in terms of dollars in a very precise way, but it's a pretty good measurement of utilization in terms of how much revenue is being influenced somehow by the website. And so you've got to get creative. Jason agrees that distributors are still very early in terms of the integrity of their data. Jason also pointed out that Schneider Electric is doing some configuration in an iframe on websites. So it's powered by Schneider Electric, but the customer doesn't technically leave the distributor's website. And we know that that's true, and that's great. Coburn says State Water Heaters has a configurator on their site, but also allows distributors to embed it on theirs. So, we're making progress here. This is good. Tim is saying omnichannel is essential, but distributors need to be way ahead of their customers by providing options that do two things: meet the customer's needs and meet the ROI for the distributor based on cost to serve. This is not difficult, but it must be intentional. Joe, good friend of the show. All these people are good friends of the show. Thank you. Joe's saying, I think it is important to recognize that the marketing machine you build around this, being e-commerce, is important. It is important to recognize the marketing machine. E-commerce is only a store. Marketing makes it successful. You must bring customers to it. I think tying to CRM and other tools to build your machine is important too. Not only just getting customers to buy via e-com, but also getting new customers for your business by the content, right? So you're using this content in your marketing machine, not only to drive orders on e-com directly or indirectly, but also to become first-time customers. So this stuff is gold. What fantastic input. And let me see if I missed any in here. I think we've got most of them.
But I think to Joe's point, So what we're talking about here is your digital offering, the shopping offering. And what Joe's talking about is the marketing and the other stuff around that.
Yeah.
And you have to have both. We've seen people that have great offering, but lousy marketing, and it gets no lift, right?
Right.
Or the other way around. You could have great marketing, but the customer experience on the digital customer experience shopping is poor, and people don't return. So you have to have both.
Yeah, and Dean Mueller, who's a principal here, one of our e-commerce practice leaders, and probably knows as much about distributor e-commerce as anybody on the planet, said just a comment regarding tracking of users. If a distributor employs marketing automation, you may be able to track users and specifically what they did, specifically shopping for products. Right. So if you have the right automation, then you can actually track a lot of these behaviors. And Jason pitches in, if customers can't find a product on your site, they won't buy it. And that's certainly true, right? They've got to be able to find it. So the search has got to be right, which means the product data has got to be right. So this is helpful stuff. Thank you, everyone.
The final piece in the next stage of digital shopping is get the product right. So we talked about getting the right product. Now we want to get the product right. And this involves design tools and configuration. And we've talked a little bit about the configuration tools. We're actually working with a large distributor, large public distributor who's putting design tools on their site. All of this is about getting the product right. Once again, being able to have access to that human expertise via a chat as necessary in getting the product right. So when we step back from this, the shopping and buying are two stages of the journey, and a lot of this is where distributors have focused up to this point. There are things that should be happening in shopping to take distributors to the next level, as well as looking at the other steps in the journey that go beyond shopping and buying, including payment, including fulfillment, including support, either post-sales or pre-sales. There's a whole set of other use cases that we're not addressing here, but there is plenty to be done to enhance the shopping experience of your customers. Ian, any other thoughts?
I come back to where we started, which is that you've got to understand the difference between shopping and buying, and you may have a ton of shopping that is happening on your website that's driving revenues that you cannot measure by looking at your shopping cart revenue. It's a really important point that I think many distributors miss. So I think that's it, but I will say that we're here on Wednesdays at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific time, and we're about to have the 5th research paper in the series that we're collaborating with the NAW on release. So it'll be out in less than a week, and we have another webinar coming. This one's on November 17th. This is a really important series for distributors. It's on how technology will transform wholesale distribution. You can go to naw.org/howtechwilltransform to sign up for the series, which are there are 7 pairs of research papers and webinars. This one is on marketplaces and going fully digital. So it's really important that distributors attend this and download the content. It's free. And you will learn a lot from content that we have developed ourselves in conjunction with the NAW about marketplaces, including some surprising information I bet you don't know, and our views on why it's so important to become fully digital. And those two are inexorably linked. You must be fully digital to participate effectively on websites. If we can help you with anything, come to distributionstrategy.com. You will see on the right, if you're on the webcast, that my email address is iheller@distributionstrategy.com, and Jonathan's is jbine@distributionstrategy.com. Please visit us if we can help you. Thank you so much for attending today. Jason says he's applauding us, but we just can't hear it. Jason, we're applauding you right back. Thanks so much for attending, everyone. We'll see you next week on Wholesale Change. Thanks, Jonathan. Bye now.